Hey guys, tonight we slip into dusty sandals and step into the wild, war-torn world of ancient China, where betrayal is currency, power is a blood sport, and you, my friend, are not exactly born under lucky stars. You're a child of scandal, discarded like an unwanted letter in a kingdom with no postman. The name on your birth scroll is Ying Zheng, but don't get too attached to that sweet baby identity. You'll be known by another name soon, one that echoes down history like a sword being unsheathed, Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling extra cozy, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where everyone's listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're born around 259 BCE, during one of the most violent and fragmented times in Chinese history, the Warring States period. Imagine 7 kingdoms clawing at each other's throats with armies, intrigue, and the occasional poison dumpling. And you? You're born right in the mess of it. Your father, Prince Iran of Qin, isn't even supposed to be in line for the throne. He's been sent off as a political hostage to the neighboring Zhao state, a not-so-subtle reminder that Qin better behave. But politics isn't all war and paperwork. In Zhao, your father meets a woman named Zhao Ji, a concubine of questionable background. Some fringe theories even claim she was once the lover of a powerful merchant named Lu Buwei, but hey, who keeps receipts in the 3rd century BCE? You come into this world not in glory, but under a thick fog of rumor. Some say you're not even your father's son. Historians still argue whether Lu Buwei might have had a stronger claim to your paternity than Prince Iran. You're barely crawling and already the subject of palace gossip. Not exactly the lullaby you hoped for. Then, before your first birthday, things get worse. War breaks out between your home state of Qin and your current home of Zhao. You and your mother become liabilities, political nuisances caught in the middle of sword-waving grown-ups. The Zhao court reportedly despises you. One popular tale, maybe apocryphal, but too juicy to ignore, says your captors considered killing you as a baby, tossing you down a well like a stone skipped across fate. But somehow, you survive. Here's the thing about you, even as a toddler, you carry a strange intensity. Maybe it's the way you stare at people a second too long. Maybe it's the eerie calm when things get loud. One servant later recalls that even at 3, you rarely cried. You just watched. Quiet. Cold. Calculating. Your mother tries to shield you, but she's under constant scrutiny. She's a foreign woman, her status flimsy, her past whispered about behind silk fans. You grow up surrounded by mistrust, breathing in tension like it's incense. There's no lull in the background noise, just the echo of plodding footsteps outside your door. But life isn't all bad. You're technically royalty, and that means tutors, books, and a front-row seat to statecraft. You're taught the classics, history, strategy, etiquette, but also survival. Every lesson is a warning in disguise. Never show your full hand. Never trust a smile. And always, always remember, power is never given. It's taken. By the time you're 9 or 10, your father's luck changes. He's adopted by the ruling queen of Qin and bumped up the succession ladder, like winning a bloody lottery you didn't buy a ticket for. Suddenly, he's the crown prince again. And that means you're no longer just the despised kid in exile. You're a potential heir to the throne of one of the most ruthless, militarized states in China. But don't celebrate yet. The court back in Qin. They're suspicious. You were raised in enemy territory. Your mother's reputation is a scandal wrapped in silk. You're still just a boy. A quiet one. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes people nervous. This is when a man named Lu Buwei, remember him, steps back into the picture. He's a former merchant turned power broker, and he's got a plan. He pulls strings, bribes ministers, and maybe forges a few documents. Shu, we're all friends here, to help your father become King Shuangxiang of Qin. And just like that, you become the crown prince of one of the most powerful, and dangerous, kingdoms in the land. You move to the Qin capital, Xianyang. It's a fortress of a city, all looming towers and military discipline. Nothing like soft Zhao. Here, loyalty is enforced with iron, and betrayal is rewarded with public execution. The throne you're now in line for. It's surrounded by daggers, not cushions. At 13, just as your voice is deepening and your legs growing into a warrior's gait, your father dies. Sudden. Suspicious. But of course, nothing's ever confirmed. Historians still argue whether Lu Buwei orchestrated the whole thing to get you on the throne as a puppet ruler. You're crowned king of Qin at the ripe age of 13, with Lu Buwei appointed as chancellor to help you rule. You don't scream. You don't protest. You sit still, in those heavy robes, your small hands gripping the dragon-carved arms of your new throne. They think you're a child. They think they'll control you. They're very wrong. You sit there, 13, thin as a reed, wearing robes that feel more like a costume than authority. The grown men around you chuckle politely, bowing just deep enough to flatter but never enough to fear. Lu Buwei, your so-called guardian and chancellor, acts like a proud uncle. But you know better. You've seen how he looks at the ministers, like a man who already owns the throne and just hasn't had time to redecorate yet. So you watch. You study. You stay quiet. Growing up in Zhao taught you to be still, to learn from silence. Every meal in the Qin court is a performance, every conversation a trap. Ministers try to manipulate you with kind words and sideways glances. They call you wise beyond your years, but what they really mean is pliable, moldable, easy to steer. You let them think that. But in your head, you're already planning how to break the strings. You start with information. You eavesdrop, absorb, memorize. Your tutors teach you calligraphy and law, but you're more interested in military strategy and the psychology of power. You ask questions, sharp, inconvenient ones. Why is this general favored? What happened to the last treasurer? Why does Lu Buwei always meet with that eunuch in private? Speaking of Lu Buwei, he's a man who never stops smiling. His influence spreads like ink on silk. He places allies in every corner of government, rewards the obedient, eliminates the inconvenient. And he's got secrets. One of them. Your mother. Turns out she's not the mourning widow she pretends to be. Behind the veils and the tears, Zhao Ji has developed a rather scandalous private life. She's taken up with a man named Lao Ai, a former actor with a flair for the dramatic and a very fake title. Lu Buwei helped place him in your mother's quarters, hoping to distract her and, maybe, distract you too. Fringe sources even suggest Lao Ai was, unusually talented at playing roles. You can fill in the blanks. Anyway, it's all a little too convenient, isn't it? Lao Ai starts whispering into your mother's ear. Soon, he's throwing parties, commanding guards, acting like some kind of shadow prince. And your mother? She gives birth to 2 secret sons. Not yours, of course. But heirs, technically. Competition. That's not going to work for you. You wait. You keep quiet. You grow into your long limbs and your sharper instincts. By the time you're in your late teens, you're no longer just a boy king. You've become something else, something colder. You've seen too much to be soft. And then, in a single, sudden storm of steel and strategy, you strike. Lao Ai, ever the overconfident actor, attempts a coup. Maybe he believes the Empress Dowager's favor makes him invincible. Maybe he just thinks you're still that quiet boy with oversized robes. Whatever the reason, he underestimates you. You unleash your private guards, loyal only to you. The coup is crushed before it even gets traction. Lao Ai is captured, beaten, and, depending on which historian you ask, either executed by slow slicing or torn apart. His sons, your half-brothers, are executed too. Harsh. Yes. But you're not in the business of leaving threats alive. And your mother? You exile her to a secluded palace, where she'll live out the rest of her life under house arrest, her letters censored and her servants vetted. You don't kill her. You're not a monster. But you make it very clear, no one rules but you. With Lao Ai gone and your mother silenced, there's only one real obstacle left, Lu Buwei. Now, this one's trickier. Lu Buwei isn't just powerful, he's liked. He's the one who helped your father rise, helped you ascend, funded half the court and probably bribed the other half. Removing him is like uprooting an old tree without disturbing the forest. So you do what you always do, you wait. You begin by quietly reducing his influence. You appoint new ministers, ones loyal to you, not him. You undermine his decisions, reverse his policies. You let rumors circulate that maybe Lu Buwei has overstayed his welcome. He senses the shift. He's not stupid. He tries to save face, to retreat gracefully by retiring to a country estate. You let him go. But not too far. You keep an eye on him. And then, another scandal surfaces. Fringe accounts suggest Lu Buwei might be responsible for even more secrets involving your mother. Whether true or not, it's enough. You write him a letter. Short. Brutal. You order him to cut all ties to politics and retreat further into isolation. He does. And then, perhaps sensing what might come next, he drinks poison and dies. Quietly. No funeral procession. No tears. At last, the court belongs to you. You're barely 21, and you've already outmaneuvered every puppet master who tried to pull your strings. The palace is quiet now. The laughter of court jesters replaced by the silent weight of your gaze. Ministers bow lower. Generals speak carefully. Servants walk with softer steps. You've survived boyhood in a viper pit. You've killed your enemies, exiled your mother, and dismantled the very network that once installed you. Now, you sit on the dragon throne, not as a child king, not as a figurehead, but as the true ruler of Qin. And you're just getting started. Power tastes strange at first. Like metal, or maybe ink. You're still young, barely a man by the reckoning of the court, but already there's a certain glint in your eyes that keeps even veteran generals second-guessing their tone when they address you. You no longer walk through the palace, you occupy it. And the kingdom of Qin. It begins to reshape itself in your image. But here's the problem with ruling, everyone wants something. Tribute, status, land, mercy. You soon realize that ruling isn't about making everyone happy, it's about deciding who stays unhappy without turning into your next assassin. Enter Lu Buwei's legacy, one that outlives the man himself. While you were a boy, he made sure to keep a merchant's eye on everything. Bureaucracy, infrastructure, and people. One of those investments he made is a certain man named Li Si. A scholar, a lawyer, a mind like a whetstone. You see promise in Li Si immediately. Where others see a dusty intellectual with ink-stained hands, you see a tool. Sharp, unsentimental, focused. He's the kind of man who doesn't just understand how laws work, he understands how they control people. So you elevate him. Slowly. Quietly. And he becomes your most loyal political weapon. But you still need something else. Something with arms. And blades. And an unshakable thirst for conquest. That's where Wang Jian comes in. Now Wang Jian isn't your typical general. He's older, calculating, and reportedly once demanded half a kingdom's treasury before agreeing to command your armies. But you respect that. Because in a world of backstabbing yes men, anyone confident enough to name his price is someone worth watching. So you strike a balance, Li Si sharpens your governance, and Wang Jian prepares your wars. But there's a third player who's even more slippery, Zheng Guo, a spy-turned-engineer from enemy territory. He shows up in Qin with an innocent little idea: let's build a canal to improve irrigation and farming. How wholesome. Except it's not. Zheng Guo was sent by the state of Han as a saboteur, hoping to bankrupt Qin with an overambitious waterworks project. Spoiler alert, you find out. But instead of executing him, you make a classic move, very on brand for you, you let him finish it. Because even sabotage, when built properly, can become infrastructure. The canal works brilliantly, and Qin's crops flourish. So thank you, enemy spy. Enjoy your new job title, accidental contributor to national greatness. Your enemies are everywhere, though. Every neighboring state eyes you with a mix of fear and annoyance, like an overachieving sibling who keeps winning family game night. Han, Zhao, Wei, Yan, Chu, and Qi, they all know Qin is different. Not just richer or more militarized, but hungrier. And you? You're starving for more. You send envoys. Some to threaten. Some to flatter. Some to mislead. You're not above lying. In fact, you rather enjoy it when it's strategic. Remember the story of the horse and the city walls? No. Here's a quirky one: you once sent a prized horse to another kingdom as a diplomatic gift. A beautiful stallion. Except, it wasn't just a gift. It was a test. You waited to see whether they would honor you by treating the horse properly, or insult you by using it for labor. They chose wrong. And you remembered. So now the game begins. Your military reforms are brutal and efficient. You standardize weapons. Train soldiers year-round. Abolish noble-led militias. Every man fights for the state, not a clan. You even institute a ranking system where soldiers are promoted by kills, not bloodline. Practical? Yes. Gruesome? Also yes. But Qin's armies become legendary for their discipline. The other states are slower to catch up. Their courts are still tangled in tradition and protocol. You're building a war machine. But you're not just about iron and swords. You also know the power of a good illusion. To many outside Qin, you're still just that quiet boy from Zhao. Maybe a little dangerous. But still, young. So you let them think that. You send soft-spoken diplomats. You sign vague treaties. You host envoys in opulent banquets and let them report back about how reasonable King Zheng of Qin seems. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, you're planning the full dismantling of every kingdom on the map. It starts with Han, the smallest and weakest of the bunch. Like a crab with a cracked shell, they're easy to crush. You send in troops. Fast. Precise. Within months, they're absorbed into Qin like a drop of ink in water. No fanfare. No mercy. The conquest sends shockwaves. Now, the other states scramble. Some try to band together. Others double down on internal reform. But it's too late. You've shown your teeth. But conquest is a slow game. Even you, crowned, powerful, paranoid, have to play it carefully. You need to weaken your enemies before invading. So you begin to sow seeds of discord. Spread misinformation. Bribe advisors. Turn siblings against each other. You know that a kingdom at war with itself is ripe for the picking. And if that fails, there's always assassins. You've always had a strange relationship with assassination. Born under its shadow. Raised with it as bedtime rumor. Now, you use it like a scalpel. Remove a general here. A scheming minister there. The borders bleed a little more each year. You rarely sleep in the same chamber twice. Your food is sampled. Your bathwater is tested. Your inner circle is smaller than a calligraphy brush's tip. You trust almost no one, and that keeps you alive. Historians still argue whether your paranoia was justified or if it simply fueled the spiral toward tyranny. But from your vantage point, it's not paranoia if the threats are real. And they are. Because with Han devoured, the other kingdoms know, they're next. So now you've conquered Han. Easy pickings. Barely even broke a sweat. 1 down, 6 to go. But don't get cocky, because next comes Zhao. And Zhao isn't just another dot on the map. Zhao is personal. Zhao is the kingdom that held you hostage as a child, the place where courtiers whispered that your mother was a disgrace and you were a mistake. Zhao made you. And now you're going to unmake it. But first, you get theatrical. You stage a royal funeral. No one actually died. Not recently, anyway. But the kingdom of Zhao doesn't need to know that. What matters is that this funeral sends a delegation across the border, right into Zhao territory. And riding with this somber little caravan, a would-be assassin, Jing Ku, and a map. Inside that map, a hidden dagger. And inside that dagger, well, let's just say your intentions. The plan is bold. Poetic, even. Jing Ku is to present the map to the king of Zhao, then lunge and kill him mid-ceremony. Neat, quiet, efficient. Except it isn't. The plot fails spectacularly. Jing Ku lunges, the king bolts, chaos erupts, and the would-be assassin is cut down in a flurry of guards and blade tips. So much for elegance. But here's what really stings, Zhao knows now. They know you're coming, not as a diplomat, not as a friend, but as a predator. The illusion is shattered. No more trickery. Just war. You unleash Wang Jian, your warhorse of a general, on Zhao. He's not young anymore, his beard's probably got more gray than black, but his mind is sharp, his patience endless. And when he moves like a slow avalanche. One town. Then another. He lets Zhao tire itself out, then closes in. Zhao fights hard. The terrain is rough. The people fierce. But you're relentless. You've turned Qin into a machine, and Zhao, proud Zhao, is ground beneath it. After 3 years, the capital falls. You ride through the ruined city gates not as a visitor, not as a former prisoner, but as its master. The same halls where you were once a child hostage now echo with the sound of your boots. Poetic justice? Maybe. Or just a full-circle revenge fantasy with extremely high production value. Still, Zhao isn't fully subdued. Prince Zhao Jia flees and tries to re-establish the court elsewhere. But Wang Ben, Wang Jian's equally competent son, finishes the job. The royal line of Zhao is extinguished. The last of your childhood ghosts, buried beneath rubble and silence. Now the other states really start sweating. Wei folds next, like wet parchment. They had the misfortune of being stuck between stronger neighbors, and once Zhao is gone, they're exposed like a turtle without a shell. They plead. They resist. And then they disappear. 3 kingdoms down. But not all threats were crowns. Back home, you get word of trouble inside your own walls, again. Because peace, even temporary, gives people time to scheme. You receive reports about cults springing up in the provinces, people whispering that you're angering the heavens, that maybe you shouldn't be expanding this fast. Something about a black dragon appearing in the sky. Superstitions. But dangerous ones. So what do? You ban all unofficial divinations. Burn prophecies. And you start centralizing religion, too. Only your astrologers, your priests, your historians are allowed to speak of the heavens. This is becoming a pattern, isn't it? Control the information. Control the future. Still, the empire's pulse remains steady, if a little strained. You return your gaze outward, to Chu, the biggest, wildest kingdom left. Chu is different. Where Zhao was proud and sharp-edged, Chu is sprawling, chaotic, and deceptively soft. Its terrain is full of mountains and rivers, its generals unpredictable. And their army? Massive. You consult your war council. One general recommends a quick strike with 200,000 men. You frown. Sounds too easy. Then old man Wang Jian steps forward. He scratches his beard, asks for 600,000 troops, and a lot of gold. When asked why, he famously says, "I want to make sure I win." That's the kind of man you trust. So you send him. And not with suspicion, but with full support. You've learned the value of patience, of trusting your strongest players when the stakes are this high. Wang Jian doesn't disappoint. He pretends to go soft at first. Feigns caution. Lets Chu relax. Then strikes like a coiled serpent. Entire battalions vanish into ambushes. Supply lines collapse. Panic spreads. The Battle of Shochuan becomes legend. The Chu crown prince dies. The capital falls. And Chu, the vast, ancient kingdom, becomes another line on your map. Now even the skies seem quieter. That's 5. Yan is next, and you might think they'd put up a real fight. But the truth is, they're already weakened, by fear, by chaos, by you. They're the ones who sent Jing Ku, remember? That failed assassination attempt. Yeah. You haven't forgotten either. You move on them like a shark through kelp. There's barely any resistance. The king flees to Liaodong, the last corner of his crumbling domain. You catch up. You always do. By the time you reach Qi, the last state, it's almost embarrassing. Qi folds without a fight. They've watched 6 kingdoms fall. Seen blood flood rivers. Watched heads roll and capitals burn. They open their gates, and you walk in. Like a man collecting a final chess piece after a very long game. You've done it. For the first time in Chinese history, the warring states are unified under a single ruler. And you? You're not King Zheng of Qin anymore. You're something new. A title no one's ever claimed before, Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. It starts with a name. Not just any name, a title. Shi Huang, first emperor. You invent it, because nothing existing is good enough. King is for those who play at power. You've earned something different, something eternal. And the new title? It fits like a crown made of steel. Your ministers bow deeper now. Commoners say your name with a pause. You issue edicts with the weight of heaven behind them. Because this isn't just about victory. It's about identity. You're not the ruler of a kingdom, you are the center of a unified world. Now, unification isn't just a trophy. It's an administrative headache. Every state you've conquered has its own systems, weights, languages, laws, currencies, timekeeping. It's chaos. So what do? You standardize everything. You declare a single writing system. No more dialects or scribes inventing their own squiggles. From now on, Qin script is the script. One language to bind them all. You issue uniform weights and measures. That means a pound is a pound no matter where you buy it, handy when your empire spans mountains, rivers, and rice paddies. You even standardize axle width. Why? Because inconsistent carts damage roads. You want your empire to roll smoothly. Speaking of roads, oh, the roads. You build them like arteries across the empire, 7,000 kilometers of them, all radiating outward from the capital, Xianyang, like the spokes of a celestial wheel. Soldiers can move faster. Messages can travel in days, not weeks. And yes, tax collectors arrive right on time. Coincidence? Not quite. Because while the roads bring order, they also bring control. You're not just creating convenience. You're weaving a net, and every city, village, and province is now caught in it. But not everyone loves being caught. Scholars begin to murmur. Poets lament the loss of local customs. Some call your standardization a kind of quiet violence, a flattening of rich diversity into dull uniformity. Historians still argue whether this was visionary governance, or oppressive efficiency. You don't care. You're too busy rewriting the very rules of rule. You restructure the empire into commanderies, stripping the old feudal lords of their hereditary power. No more nobles handing down fiefdoms like family heirlooms. Governors are appointed by you, and dismissed by you. The old aristocracy. They hate it. Which is probably why you drag most of them back to Xianyang and force them to live under your watchful eye. Less ruling. More tea drinking. And if someone resists, you send them a mirror-polished sword and a polite suggestion that it's time for retirement. Or you just build a wall around them, literally. Like with the Great Wall. Ah yes, the wall. Now, this isn't the sleek, winding dragon of stone you see in tourist brochures. Not yet. In your time, it's mostly rammed earth, built atop earlier fortifications. But it stretches like a scar across your northern border, linking together defensive lines from old kingdoms. It's a wall made of sweat, blood, and the bones of countless laborers who'll never be named. It serves two purposes: keep out nomadic raiders from the steppe, and remind your people that there is an outside world, and it's dangerous. Fringe accounts say you used hundreds of thousands of workers, including conscripted peasants, criminals, and captured enemies. The death toll. Let's just say the wall has more ghosts than bricks. But it works. For now. At court, your laws are brutal but effective. Legalism is your gospel. Forget Confucian virtue and moral ambiguity. Your version of justice is clear: reward the obedient, crush the disobedient. You create a law code so strict, people get their noses cut off for stealing grain, and their families punished for lying about it. Merchants who cheat in weights might lose a hand. Or their business. Or both. Depends on the mood. And yet, crime drops. Order increases. Grain moves more efficiently. Armies obey without question. Your rule, iron-fisted, meticulous, isn't popular, but it works. Still, you don't just rule by terror. You rule by spectacle. Xianyang becomes your masterpiece. Palaces of painted stone. Artificial lakes reflecting golden pavilions. You demand that every former kingdom send statues, tribute, and symbols of their submission to decorate your capital. It's a museum of conquered pride, and you live at its center. You also begin building the massive Ipang Palace, designed to house not just you, but the entire government. And maybe your successors. And their horses. And probably their egos. It's rumored to span 8 kilometers in length, though historians still debate whether it was ever finished. Some sources claim you start to surround yourself with automata, early machines, gears and pulleys designed to mimic birds, animals, dancers. Mechanical marvels. All whispering the same message: the emperor commands nature itself. But even nature has opinions. Earthquakes begin to rattle the empire. Floods ruin harvests. Droughts blacken the skies. Some call it coincidence. Others, divine disapproval. And those murmurs, once quiet, start to rise again. The idea that maybe, just maybe, you've pushed too far. Your solution: burn the past. Literally. In one of your most infamous moves, you order the burning of the books. All historical records, philosophical writings, and poetry not sanctioned by the court. Gone. Into the fire. Especially Confucian texts. Their ideas about virtue and balance. Not your style. Scholars who resist. They vanish. Some say buried alive. Others say exiled. A few even say you forced them to help build your tomb, one brick at a time. Either way, the message is clear: only one version of history matters now. Yours. You've burned the books, silenced the scholars, and bent time itself to your narrative. But ruling isn't just about the past. It's about defeating the future too. So you fix your eyes on something bigger than politics. Bigger than armies, roads, and statues. Immortality. Yes. You've unified China, rewritten law, and restructured the heavens, at least on paper. But the one thing you haven't beaten is death. And that simply will not do. So you begin your most ambitious project yet: not a battle, not a palace, an escape plan from mortality. You start with alchemists. They arrive in your court bearing scrolls, powders, and strange little bottles. They speak in riddles, claim to know the secrets of mercury, jade, and gold. They say if you consume the right mixture, you can extend your life. Maybe even live forever. You believe them. Why wouldn't you? You've already done what no other ruler has. Why should death be any different? So you drink their concoctions, elixirs made of crushed pearls, powdered jade, and mercury. Yes, mercury. The same thing we now know to be toxic. But you're no chemist. You're an emperor. You drink for years, chasing the idea that eternity can be bottled. Historians still argue whether these immortality pills contributed to your increasingly erratic behavior, your sudden fits of paranoia, your unexplained rages, your long disappearances. But the timing is suspicious, isn't it? Still, you don't stop. You also dispatch expeditions. Ships sail eastward, toward mythical lands across the sea, realms like Penglai, where sages live forever and the air smells of peaches that bloom once every 3,000 years. You send hundreds of men, led by a man named Su Fu, with orders to find these islands and return with the elixir of life. They never come back. Or maybe they do, but empty-handed. One account suggests Su Fu returns with excuses, asking for more ships, more time, more supplies. Another says he simply vanishes. Found a nice island. Became a god. Retired early. Who knows? You're furious. But not surprised. The path to eternity, it seems, isn't so straightforward. You build temples. You consult astrologers. You perform rituals. You even have a sacred mountain climbed in your name. But still, death does not yield. And that's when the dreams start. Night after night, strange omens. Meteors in the sky. Black clouds over sacred rivers. You see yourself being dragged beneath the earth by faceless spirits. You stop sleeping in one place. You build secret passageways between chambers, trying to stay ahead of your fate. You also begin to fear water. That's new. Rumors circulate that you've stopped crossing rivers entirely. That when you must, you do so at night, under heavy guard, in total silence. Why? Because someone carved a stone near the river with your name on it and a prophecy, the emperor will die by water. The stone is found, its words chiseled into permanence. You order the man who discovered it executed. Then, the entire region is punished. The stone. Smashed. The river. Cursed. But deep down, you can't shake the feeling that something has shifted. Because as much as you've tried to control the world, paper, roads, laws, people, you can't control the sky. And heaven, as every sage will tell you, keeps score. Still, there's work to do. You've grown increasingly obsessed with the unseen, ghosts, spirits, portents. Your court is full of diviners now. Every decision is checked against the stars. A sneeze from the wrong minister becomes a bad omen. A misaligned sunrise delays royal decrees. You even begin reassigning palace staff based on dream interpretations. The logical machine you built during your conquests. It's beginning to rust. And yet, your power never wavers. The empire still functions. Armies still drill. Taxes still arrive. The people still bow. But your grip tightens. You expand the secret police. They report directly to you, about everyone. Governors. Courtiers. Scholars. Your own sons. You stop trusting almost anyone. Except maybe Li Si. And even he, the brilliant legalist who once helped shape your empire, now speaks with measured tones, watching your face for flickers of approval. He used to give advice. Now, he mostly confirms your suspicions. It's lonely at the top. But you're not here for comfort. You're here to defeat death. One night, as a storm swirls outside the palace, you summon your engineers. You want to know how much mercury is available in the treasury vaults. Why? Because you've begun designing your tomb. Yes, your tomb. But not as a concession. As a backup. A trick. You believe that if you control death's domain, if you build the underworld in your image, you might master it, or at least confuse it long enough for another elixir to arrive. And so, construction intensifies. Thousands of workers vanish into a sealed chamber outside Xianyang. No one talks about what happens inside. But the whispers are wild, rivers of mercury. Crossbows rigged to fire at intruders. A ceiling encrusted with jewels mimicking constellations. And a full-scale recreation of your empire, right down to its mountains, cities, and palaces. And at the center? You. At peace. Maybe. Because outside the tomb, the world is still turning. And not all is quiet. In the south, rebellion simmer. In the north, nomads gather. Your legacy, forged in iron, is now beginning to rust at the edges. But for now, the emperor still lives. And the elixir could arrive any day. So now you're the first emperor, living in a world that bows when you breathe and trembles when you blink. You've got the title, the palaces, the walls, the armies, and a few suspiciously mercury-heavy immortality potions in your veins. Seems like everything should be golden. Except it isn't. Because even in your moment of triumph, especially in your moment of triumph, you begin to realize that victory has a heartbeat. And it's racing. You start to see enemies in every corner. Not just on the borders, but inside your own walls. Inside your bloodline. You've got sons. Many sons. But one stands out, or rather, stands back. Fusu. He's your eldest, the crown prince. Smart. Calm. Just the right amount of moral backbone. And yes, annoyingly fond of Confucianism. You love him in the way a tiger might love a cautious deer, grudgingly, and with a sense of impending doom. He respects you, but not your methods. He questions your executions. Raises eyebrows at your book burnings. You can see it in his eyes, he doesn't want to be you. He wants to be better. You're not sure whether to feel insulted or impressed. Still, you send him north to defend the frontier, a test, maybe. Or maybe just to get him out of your shadow. You pair him with General Meng Tian, a man so reliable you sometimes forget he's real. But that's not the only shadow moving behind your throne. Enter Zhao Gao, your chief eunuch and, let's just say, master manipulator. He's a man who knows exactly when to whisper, when to grovel, and when to disappear. He teaches your younger son, Huhai, in court etiquette, legal theory, and, allegedly, how to lie like a seasoned viper. Zhao Gao senses what's coming. You're aging. Your health is faltering. Whether it's the mercury, the stress, or just the natural decay of even the greatest mortals, your body begins to betray you. You feel it in your legs. Your breath. The sudden blackness that creeps into your vision when you stand too fast. But you won't stop moving. In a strange turn of logic, you decide that if death won't come to you in Xianyang, maybe you can outrun it. You embark on a tour, a final inspection of your empire, your kingdom of kingdoms, a victory lap of sorts. The caravan is massive. Soldiers, ministers, porters, astrologers, doctors, and animals. It snakes through the countryside like a living dragon. Everywhere you go, crowds gather. They cheer. They weep. They prostrate themselves so thoroughly they forget to breathe. But you barely notice them anymore. You're obsessed with omens. With stars. With the sound of your own heartbeat. You grow quieter. More inward. Every morning begins with a check of your pulse. Every night ends with a bitter tea brewed by trembling servants who've learned not to ask questions. And then, somewhere in the distant east, near the coast, in the shadow of sacred Mount Langya, it happens. You collapse. Not dramatically. Not in battle or amid thunder. Just, quietly. A sharp breath. A stagger. A fall. Your servants panic. The doctors are summoned. But it's already too late. The first emperor of China is dead. And no one is allowed to know. Not yet. Your death, inconveniently, occurs hundreds of miles from the capital. Zhao Gao, ever the tactician, knows what news like this can do. Civil unrest. Panic. Opportunistic rebellion. A scramble for power. So he seals the information. Literally. The caravan continues its journey, only now, your carriage is closed and heavily guarded. Ministers ride in silence. Food is left untouched. Some accounts say the smell became an issue. So the court ordered carts of salted fish to follow behind, disguising the stench of imperial decay with the aroma of rotting mackerel. Elegant, right? Meanwhile, Zhao Gao, Li Si, and a few others huddle in the dark, sweating beneath their robes. They're faced with a terrifying question: what now? The logical answer is simple. Crown Prince Fusu, your eldest, should be summoned. He's far away, but capable. Level-headed. A direct heir. But logic has left the building. Zhao Gao hates Fusu. Fusu would never keep him in power. And so, the plan begins to take shape. A forged edict is written, supposedly from you, in your dying breath. It declares that Fusu has displeased the emperor and must commit suicide. It appoints your younger, pliable son Huhai as heir. The letter is delivered. Fusu reads the decree. He hesitates. Meng Tian, the general beside him, urges caution. But Fusu, ever dutiful, ever Confucian, obeys. He takes his own life. And just like that, the future shifts. When your body finally arrives back in Xianyang, the palace is already prepared. Huhai ascends the throne. Zhao Gao pulls the strings. Li Si pretends to smile. And you, once the unifier of China, the builder of walls and burner of books, are lowered into the most elaborate tomb the world has never fully seen. And still, no one outside the court knows you're dead. The people continue to bow. Letters still arrive addressed to you. Tax shipments bear your seal. Your ghost rules, as your body sinks deeper into a mercury-laced mausoleum that no soul is permitted to enter. So there you are, entombed in silence beneath a hill in Shaanxi, surrounded by rivers of mercury and an empire carved in miniature. Not even the stars overhead are real anymore, they're embedded above you, gemstones mimicking constellations you once had astrologers track for signs of immortality. You've built your own afterlife. But above ground, the living are already messing it up. Zhao Gao has Huhai on the throne now, your younger son, the one you barely trusted to hold a ceremonial sword without supervision. He's not a leader. He's a mirror. Whatever Zhao Gao reflects into him, he believes. At first, there's calm. Hu Hai speaks your words, signs your name, follows your decrees. The empire thinks the first emperor is still watching. But then cracks form. Hu Hai starts issuing his own orders, wild ones. He increases taxes. Doubles down on forced labor. Pushes the people harder than even you dared. Why? Because he wants to impress a dead man, you. He orders the completion of your massive palace, your tomb, your walls. Thousands are conscripted. Whole villages vanish into construction sites. Farmers become bricklayers. Criminals become corpses in clay. And the empire groans under the weight. You'd think Zhao Gao would moderate this, right? He's the puppet master, after all. But Zhao Gao has changed, too. Or maybe he's simply revealing what he always was, a man who enjoys control for control's sake. He begins eliminating rivals, quietly, efficiently. Li Si, your trusted advisor. He's next. Zhao Gao accuses him of treason. For conspiring against the second emperor. For failing to be loyal enough. Li Si, who once penned the laws of your land, is arrested, tortured, and dragged in chains across the empire he helped build. He is forced to write his own death sentence. Then he's executed. Tossed aside like a loose thread. And just like that, the final architects of your dynasty are gone. The empire is ruled by a nervous boy and a vengeful eunuch. It doesn't take long for the world to notice. The laborers, the ones building your tomb, the walls, the roads, they revolt first. In the southeast, a storm delays the transport of convicts. They fear they'll be executed for arriving late, so they do the only logical thing, they start a rebellion. That rebellion catches fire. Other provinces follow. Whole regions begin to burn. Peasants, soldiers, former nobles, everyone sees what you once unified, and they start taking it apart. Brick by brick. Edict by edict. And guess what? Zhao Gao, master manipulator that he is, loses control. His paranoia consumes him. He accuses Hu Hai of being weak, of failing to live up to your legacy. Hu Hai, already drowning in fear, turns to his old tutor for comfort. Zhao Gao gives him a sword. And a suggestion. Not long after, the second emperor is found dead. Suicide, they say. On paper. Zhao Gao installs a puppet prince next, Ziying, a distant member of the royal family. But by now the dynasty isn't a tiger, it's a taxidermy tiger stuffed with panic. The rebellions press inward. Cities fall. Armories are looted. The once unified empire fractures like glass under heat. Finally, Ziying makes the only move that still makes sense, he surrenders. He opens the gates of Xianyang to Liu Bang, a peasant-turned-general, whose timing is annoyingly perfect. And with that, the Qin dynasty dies, less than 4 years after you did. Your empire, the one you carved from chaos with blade and law, unravels like a spool of silk tumbling down palace steps. Historians still argue whether the empire fell because of your harsh rule, your premature death, or the incompetence of those who followed. Probably all three. But one thing is certain, the dream of a unified China doesn't die with Qin. Liu Bang, soon to be known as Emperor Gaozu, picks up the pieces. He's smarter than he looks. He keeps some of your laws, tosses the more brutal ones, softens the rhetoric. His dynasty, the Han, will carry the idea of China forward for centuries. And what about your body? Still entombed. Still sealed. To this day, your mausoleum has never been fully excavated. Archaeologists have found the famed terracotta army, thousands of clay soldiers standing in formation, each with unique features, guarding your eternal slumber. Horses. Chariots. Archers. All silent. All facing east. It's said that rivers of mercury still flow inside the tomb. Scientists have tested the soil near the mound and found unusually high levels of the toxic element. Maybe it's true. Maybe your engineers really did create an underground empire laced with poison, so no one could ever steal what belonged to the dead. But no one knows for sure. Because the tomb remains untouched. Why? Fear. Not of curses. But of you. Excavating your tomb would require disturbing the most complex, dangerous burial site in Chinese history. And perhaps, just perhaps, there's a lingering sense that the first emperor still holds power, even in death. So you lie there. Surrounded by clay and silence. The architect of China. The destroyer of its kings. The man who tried to cheat death, and instead became a legend. Your laws are gone. Your palaces crumbled. Your dynasty, forgotten by the next generation. But your idea? It lives on. You thought you'd be remembered for your empire. For your walls, your laws, your armies. But the world, it turns out, remembers you for your ghost. Because what you left behind isn't just a tomb or a story, it's an unsolved mystery, buried beneath a hill no one dares open. A puzzle sealed in stone and silence. You wanted immortality. You might have found it in the strangest way possible, not by escaping death, but by becoming its most elaborate tenant. And now, centuries later, people are still talking about you. Let's start with the terracotta army, your clay soldiers who, let's be honest, probably get more attention than you do these days. Thousands of them. Life-size. Each one with distinct facial features. Some smile faintly. Some look bored. Some glare like they've just been told the afterlife has taxes. No two are alike. That's not a metaphor. Archaeologists have analyzed ears, noses, armor patterns. Each warrior is a little clay snowflake with its own vibe. And remember, these were meant to guard you. In death. Forever. They stand in rows, in battle formation, protecting your tomb like a ghost garrison frozen in time. Archers kneel behind infantry. Cavalry holds reins with stone fingers. Bronze weapons once gleamed in their hands, many still do, after thousands of years, thanks to clever anti-corrosion techniques that modern scientists are still trying to fully replicate. Quirky fact, when first unearthed, these warriors were painted in vibrant colors, purples, reds, greens. But the pigments oxidized within minutes of exposure to air, and most faded to dull gray. So now, visitors see them as somber soldiers, not the neon-painted sentinels they once were. Funny how time edits your legacy without asking. And still, the tomb itself, the core chamber where your body lies, remains untouched. Why? Well, partly because of technology. Excavating something so massive without damaging it? Not easy. But partly, it's superstition. The ancient texts say the tomb contains rivers of flowing mercury, triggered crossbows aimed at intruders, and even booby traps designed to kill tomb robbers before they take 3 steps. Is it true? Possibly. Some modern soil tests have revealed alarmingly high mercury levels around the site. So unless the mountain just has very bad skincare habits, there's probably something to the legend. You didn't just want a tomb. You wanted a universe. One where you still ruled, even if the breath had left your body. Scholars believe your burial complex might be larger than Vatican City. And remember, you started building it before you'd even conquered China. Talk about optimism. You were planning your afterlife like it was your second empire. And, in a way, it was. But while the ground holds your body, the culture holds your story. And that story is complicated. Some see you as a tyrant. A man who burned books, crushed dissent, buried scholars, and built his kingdom on forced labor and fear. Others see a visionary. The man who ended centuries of brutal war. Who standardized language and measurement. Who gave China a sense of itself as a single civilization. The blueprint of an empire that, despite your dynasty's collapse, kept echoing through centuries of rulers, poets, generals, and rebels. And then there's the third view, the most modern, perhaps the most honest. That you were both. Because power rarely comes clean. You unified a land soaked in blood. But you did it by drawing more of it. You created order by weaponizing fear. You built a state so efficient, it outlasted its own creators, but not their mistakes. Still, what makes you different from other rulers is the scale of your ambition. You didn't just want a crown. You wanted to overwrite heaven itself. To make the world reflect your logic. You didn't believe in destiny. You replaced it. Historians still debate your motives. Were you obsessed with immortality because of trauma? Was your control-freak nature a response to childhood abandonment? Did your mother's disgrace haunt you until your final breath? No one knows. Because the deeper people dig into your history, the more questions surface. Half of what we know comes from documents written after you died, by dynasties who hated you, feared you, or wanted to distance themselves from your legacy. How accurate are those accounts? Are you a monster scribbled by biased hands? Or a misunderstood architect of unity? You can't answer. But your tomb might. And that's why it's still sealed. Because once opened, the mystery ends. And maybe, just maybe, the world doesn't want to know the full truth. Maybe it's better this way, with your army standing guard, your legend half-lit by torchlight, and your name carried softly from one generation's lips to the next. Your real monument. It isn't the terracotta soldiers. It's the idea that one man, one boy, once held hostage in a rival court, could rise up, bend an entire civilization into shape, and then disappear behind a door no one has dared open for over 2,000 years. And even now, in textbooks, temples, and nighttime YouTube rabbit holes, you continue to rule. It's a strange thing, isn't it? To be more powerful dead than alive. Because now, thousands of years later, you've become a myth wearing historical clothes. Every time someone whispers your name, Qin Shi Huang, they're not just speaking of a man. They're conjuring a force. A symbol. A question mark wrapped in armor and shadow. In Chinese classrooms, you're the man who unified China. The first to call himself emperor. The one who turned chaos into a blueprint. Textbooks praise your standardization of script, currency, weights, and law. You are the man who gave China the bones it still stands on. But then, with the next page turn, they mention the darker lines, the book burnings, the mass executions, the walls built on bodies, the paranoia, the search for a deathless life at any cost. Some teachers present you as a necessary evil. Some just call you brilliant and brutal. And yet, you're in every history book. That's a form of immortality most emperors never achieve. Still, history alone isn't enough. You've seeped into popular culture like ink into old parchment. Filmmakers love you. You show up in epics, sometimes as a visionary leader, other times as a wide-eyed villain who believes he can trap time in a bottle. In one film, your obsession with immortality is so intense you're portrayed as literally turning to stone. Poetic, maybe. A little dramatic. But not far from how people already see you, frozen in ambition, untouched by age. You've even made your way into fantasy stories. Magic scrolls. Hidden tombs. Time travel plots. And of course, always some character digging for your secret treasure, only to unleash ancient curses and very bad luck. Video games. You're in those too. In strategy games, you're a playable leader, efficient, unrelenting, the kind of character who builds empires in 3 turns and wipes out enemies in 4. Always depicted with a stern brow, arms crossed, gazing over a city he either built, or is about to burn. The modern world, it seems, can't let go of you. And honestly, why should it? You're the first emperor of a civilization that still exists today. That's no small thing. The United States is barely 250 years old. You were founding empires while most modern countries were still forests and coastline. And yet, for all your accomplishments, all your monuments and massacres, the one thing you never got? Peace. You chased it across provinces, carved it into stone, drowned it in mercury. But it always slipped away. Even your tomb, that impossible cavern of bronze and dreams, was built not to rest, but to continue. A copy of the world, with you at the center. An eternal simulation. Death wasn't a destination for you, it was a glitch to be outwitted. Which is maybe why you're still here, in the minds of so many. You never left. People still argue about your motives. Did you burn books to crush dissent, or to unify minds? Did you bury scholars because they mocked you, or because they threatened the fragile unity you just created? Were you a tyrant in love with power, or a reformer overwhelmed by the scale of your vision? Maybe all of it. You were a child torn from his family, a hostage forced to smile while enemies measured his worth. You were a ruler trained in the fires of paranoia. And when you finally got control, absolute, trembling, world-bending control, you held on so tightly that you snapped history in 2. Because before you, there were kings. After you, there were emperors. And you didn't just rule a kingdom, you invented the blueprint for one. Let's not forget that. Even your mistakes became templates. Later dynasties would learn from your fall. Some relaxed the legalist grip. Others used Confucianism to butter the blade. The Han, the Tang, the Ming, they all built on your foundation. Some copied your tools. Some rewrote your methods. But none could ignore you. Your presence was like that buried tomb, always beneath the surface. Sometimes feared. Sometimes honored. Always there. And while your dynasty was short-lived, your impact was not. You redefined what it meant to rule. You redefined China. And perhaps most ironically, you proved that the quest for eternal life doesn't require magic potions, peach gardens, or sea-bound sages. All it really needs is memory. The right kind of legacy, a story carved deep enough, wide enough, terrifying and awe-inspiring enough, is immortality. Even now, someone could be watching this video with tired eyes in the middle of the night, wondering how a man born over 2 millennia ago still commands their attention. The answer? Because you built your empire on time itself. You may have tried to escape death, but in doing so, you became its landlord. Long after your bones turned to dust, or, more accurately, mercury-preserved mystery, you remain the silent engine humming beneath Chinese identity. A figure both feared and admired. A tyrant in bronze robes. A dreamer with blood on his hands. And if your tomb is your physical monument, your psychological one is even larger, an entire world still trying to understand you. Let's walk through that. Modern historians can't agree on you, and honestly, you'd love that. You wanted to be too big for a single label. And now, you're the subject of university lectures, thesis papers, and late-night arguments over cups of jasmine tea. On one hand, the pragmatic unifier. A man who ended centuries of violence. Who introduced the first centralized legal code. Who standardized currency, roads, and even thought itself. That kind of sweeping reform. It's the stuff of legends, or nightmares, depending on your angle. On the other, a control-obsessed autocrat. You silenced voices, burned the past, and bent belief to your will. You ruled by fear, executed dissenters, and quite literally poisoned yourself trying to escape the one truth no ruler can rewrite: you will die. And yet, your legacy remains one of impact. Of firsts. Let's talk about those roads again. Not the literal ones, you paved thousands of kilometers of those, but the metaphorical ones. The Qin dynasty gave China its first real sense of national identity. You helped people in distant provinces, who had never met, and never would, feel like they belonged to the same world. Same weights. Same language. Same laws. Same empire. Even if they cursed your name while hauling stones for another palace, they cursed in the same script. That's the power of a unifier. Of a man who took a puzzle scattered across valleys and mountains and smashed it into something whole. It wasn't gentle. But it worked. Quirky detail. Your empire was one of the earliest to use passport-like documents, wooden travel permits that allowed people to cross through regional checkpoints. So yes, you invented bureaucracy so hard it reached into people's saddlebags. You also made sure your bureaucracy reached the afterlife. Inside your tomb, archaeologists have found clay officials, not just soldiers. Accountants. Administrators. Even musicians. Because apparently, even your ghost required paperwork and background music. Heaven forbid the afterlife get too relaxed. And then there's your face. Or rather, your many faces. No one knows exactly what you look like. Statues vary. Paintings are fanciful. But your image, reshaped over time, has become part of global visual culture. You're often shown with that stern brow, long beard, dragon robe, and eyes that don't blink. But it's not about the face. It's about the aura. You are not remembered for softness. You are remembered for scale. Take the legend that your tomb is protected by automated crossbows, still cocked and waiting to pierce through centuries of dust. Some say it's just a rumor, a bit of flair added by Han historians. Others? They say there's some truth to it. Ancient China had the engineering chops. You had the paranoia. It's not that far-fetched. And whether it's true or not, it feels true. Which is how myths work. In some tales, you become almost supernatural, rising from your tomb during storms, stalking through the mist of the Shaanxi plains, judging the living with mercury eyes. You're part horror story, part bedtime tale, part political allegory. Which brings us back to your favorite obsession, control. You tried to control reality. And you almost pulled it off. but you couldn't control memory. And that, ironically, made your name live even longer. Your critics made sure no one forgot your cruelty. Your admirers ensured no one forgot your genius. And somewhere between the two, amid terracotta and legends, you became more than a man. You became a riddle. Here's one last quirky twist: modern Chinese culture has begun to re-examine you again. In novels. In TV dramas. In state museums. Some portray you as a nationalist icon, the strong hand that forged unity. Others as a warning from history, a reminder of how easily ambition turns to obsession. Historians still argue whether you were necessary, or avoidable, or inevitable. But no one says you were irrelevant. Even now, your story pulls people into its orbit. Visitors trek for hours just to glimpse your clay army. Scholars whisper about the unopened tomb. Documentaries put your name beside other icons of empire: Augustus, Alexander, Akbar. And you? You remain silent beneath your hill of secrets. Your guards stand watch. The air above your chamber carries a faint electric dread. Excavators hesitate. Cameras pull back. No one wants to be the one who opens the door and finds whatever it is you left behind. Because they're not just afraid of traps. They're afraid of you. Let's pause for a second. Not to rest, you wouldn't have allowed that, but to marvel. Because here we are, in the year 20-something, and people across oceans are still whispering about your tomb. Still scrolling through photos of your terracotta army. Still wondering what it was like to live under the rule of a man who declared himself the very first emperor of an ancient civilization that still exists. Not bad for someone whose reign barely outlasted his shadow. And now, as the soft hum of the world turns through another midnight, let's slip back into your world, Xianyang, the nerve center of your empire. At its peak, it buzzes with horseshoes, stamping clerks, foreign envoys, and the sound of brushstrokes on bamboo strips. You're in the middle of it all. You don't just issue commands. You rearrange existence. You're deeply involved in ritual, timing edicts to celestial events. You name mountains. Rename rivers. You see your will reflected in everything from court robes to the curvature of bridges. Even your clothes send messages. Stitched in royal purple, reserved for the Son of Heaven, you wear patterns that mimic dragons and constellations, designed to remind everyone who enters your presence that you are not a man. You are the man. And you make people remember it. Quirky detail. You reportedly carried a dragon tally, a ceremonial token broken in two. You kept one half. The matching half was sent with orders, and if the two pieces didn't fit, the command wasn't real. Think of it as the world's most imperial version of two-factor authentication. Power, after all, had to be seen. Heard. Stamped. But you weren't just pomp and paper. You were obsessed with building, permanently. Roads were laid with precision. Bridges were reinforced with iron clamps. Documents were copied in triplicate. You even ordered that old local walls be connected, giving birth to the earliest version of what would become the Great Wall of China. Yes, it wasn't the sweeping stone fortress we know today, yours was packed earth, brick, and brute labor. But it was long, it was brutal, and it was meant to say, do not come this way. And while the Great Wall physically kept people out, your legal system mentally kept people in. Legalism became your doctrine. You didn't want people to be good. You wanted them to obey. Morality? Optional. Compliance? Non-negotiable. Rewards for loyalty. Harsh penalties for rebellion. So harsh, in fact, that people followed rules not because they believed in them, but because the alternative involved public humiliation, mutilation, or death. Modern scholars call your policies efficient, even revolutionary. But your subjects just called them terrifying. Still, you didn't care. You believed that order was mercy. That chaos had cost too many lives during the warring states. That fear, while cold, was reliable. You even tried to police time. You changed calendars. Renamed years. Declared your own era as Year One. You were erasing the timeline and writing your own. Which is sort of beautiful, and kind of horrifying. And let's not forget your obsession with names. You didn't just title yourself Shi Huang Di, you demanded that no one else could use Huang or Di casually anymore. Even common words containing those characters were changed. Imagine living under a ruler so powerful you had to rename your furniture. And yet, despite all this control, there was one thing you couldn't manage. Your own fear. Even at the height of your power, you built decoys of yourself. You created a network of secret tunnels beneath your palace. You rarely slept in the same room twice. You believed death would come not from above, but from inside. Poison. Rebellion. Betrayal. Maybe even prophecy. You saw it in the skies, in omens, in dreams. You saw it in your own reflection. Which is why your death, when it finally came, was less like thunder, and more like a candle flickering out. You were on a tour of your empire, far from the capital. A routine inspection. Or perhaps, a desperate final attempt to outrun the inevitable. You collapsed. Quietly. No war cry. No last decree. Just the silence of a man who tried to conquer time and lost. And even then, your court couldn't accept it. They carted your body through the provinces with carts of fish to cover the smell. They forged edicts in your name. They installed a puppet to replace you. They tried to keep the illusion alive. But empires don't respond well to lies. And so, the walls cracked. Rebellions flared. Ministers turned on each other. Your dynasty collapsed before your tomb even settled into the soil. But still, you won something. Not eternal life. But eternal relevance. No one forgets the first emperor. It's fitting, isn't it? That your greatest construction, the one that truly worked, wasn't a wall, a tomb, or a road. It was the story of you. Because here we are, centuries peeled away like old paint, and your name still echoes through corridors of power, across school desks, inside novels, documentaries, video games, and museum halls. The first emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang. A title that carries the weight of a continent. A name that still feels heavy in the mouth. But how did that happen? You weren't supposed to be remembered like this. Your dynasty was short. Your methods were terrifying. Your reforms were rolled back, your statues toppled. By the time the Han took over, most of your laws were gone, your family line extinguished, and your name cursed in polite company. And yet, you endured. Why? Because you did something other rulers couldn't. You turned the concept of China from a geographic accident into a political certainty. You saw through the illusion of disunity. 7 war-hungry states, each with their own kings, laws, weights, languages. What chaos. You looked at that mess and said, let's fix this. Permanently. So you didn't just conquer land. You conquered structure. You standardized everything. Writing. Currency. Roads. Axle widths for carts. Even grave markers. Yes, you told people how wide their wagon wheels could be. That's not pettiness. That's efficiency. Quirky detail. Archaeologists have found your standardized weights buried in distant provinces, still accurate to the gram. 2,000 years later, and your measurement system still holds up better than half the apps on your phone. Your standardization of script, small seal script, meant that a farmer in the south could read the same government edict as a noble in the north. No confusion. No dialect trickery. You created a written thread that stitched the empire together. And it stuck. Even after your dynasty was torched and trampled, the next rulers kept your script. Kept your roads. Kept your map of how an empire should run. Because once people got a taste of order, brutal, yes, but functional, they couldn't unsee it. Now, let's talk about your influence on later rulers. You weren't just a model for China. You were a warning and a manual. The Han. They softened your rough edges but kept your structure. The Tang. They revived your imperial authority, wrapped it in poetry. Even Mao Zedong, millennia later, reportedly admired your iron will. You were the blueprint for strong central control, for the notion that peace can be manufactured, violently, if needed. Historians still argue whether this makes you a founding father or a beautifully packaged tyrant. They cite your policies, your tomb, your obsession with immortality. They wrestle with whether you built unity, or just bent everything so hard that it looked like unity. But one thing's certain, you are irresistibly cinematic. You are the plotline that writes itself. A boy raised as a political hostage. A mother entangled in court scandal. A rise to power through war, deception, and iron discipline. An empire stitched together from the bones of the fallen. And a finale so dramatic it reads like myth, searching for immortality, building a death-proof mausoleum, then dying quietly on the road, your body carted home with salted fish like a very tragic sushi roll. How could filmmakers resist? In some depictions, you're a visionary reformer. In others, a mad tyrant whispering to statues. Always powerful. Always dangerous. Always fascinating. You've been played by kings of cinema. You've been animated, reimagined, and dropped into science fiction, fantasy, even romance. There's probably a musical out there where you sing about Mercury and destiny in a velvet robe. And then there's your tomb. It still holds us. Not just archaeologists, but artists, poets, tourists, conspiracy theorists. No one can stop imagining what's down there. A perfect world in miniature. A celestial map. A grave booby-trapped with crossbows and haunted by the whisper of lost knowledge. Is it as grand as the texts say? Are the rivers of Mercury real? Could your body be perfectly preserved, floating in toxic silence? Or did you decay centuries ago, leaving only mystery? We don't know. And that's the point. You didn't want to be understood. You wanted to be unforgettable. And that, you achieved. No one thinks of China without eventually thinking of you. Your legacy is stamped on every dynasty that followed, every textbook, every museum. You failed at cheating death. But you succeeded at something much harder, becoming immortal anyway. Now picture this, the sky dimming above the Lishan hills, soft winds brushing the trees, and far below the earth, your empire waits in the dark. There are no footsteps anymore. No whispered orders or scraping quills. Just silence. The kind that presses against the bones. And still, your story pulses. Even here, in this moment, as someone listens in bed, half asleep, half awake, you're whispering through the centuries. A ruler whose legacy feels like something between a prophecy and a fever dream. Let's not sugarcoat it, you were brutal. You made decisions that reshaped the world and shattered thousands of lives in the process. But those decisions were always final. You didn't believe in half measures. If you paved a road, it led all the way. If you conquered a state, you absorbed it completely. And if you declared an era, it began now. You weren't just interested in governing people. You wanted to redesign reality. Take your bureaucracy, it wasn't just record keeping. It was a machine. Ministers answered to ministers. Clerks filed reports in triplicate. Every crime, every birth, every grain of rice had its place. And you? You were the engine at the center. If one cog faltered, you replaced it. Harshly. But there was elegance in that system, too. For the first time in Chinese history, citizens from distant corners could rely on a consistent rule of law. No more local fiefdoms with home-cooked policies. If someone tried to scam a farmer in Guangzhou, they'd be judged under the same law that applied in the capital. To modern ears, that's just common sense. To people in your time, that was radical. Still, historians will always ask, was it worth the cost? Was unity worth the deaths of scholars, the ruined books, the forced labor, the children pressed into brickmaking by torchlight? You'd probably say yes. And your tomb agrees. It's not just big. It's symbolic. You buried an entire simulation of your empire with you, rivers of mercury, mountains of bronze, traps rigged to defend your soul. It's the most paranoid expression of power ever constructed. Even the entrance has never been confirmed. Thousands of clay soldiers face outward, as if daring intruders to approach. And behind them, an invisible kingdom, sealed tight, daring us to ask the wrong question. Quirky detail. The terracotta army was never mentioned in historical texts until its discovery in 1974. Meaning for 2,000 years, your secret army stood its post, unseen, unspoken, unspoiled by rumor. That's not just a monument. That's a confession. You built something no one was ever meant to see, just in case. And now, everyone wants to. There's still debate about what to do with your tomb. Should it be excavated? Preserved? Left untouched, a riddle half solved. Scientists worry about preservation, about traps, about what centuries of sealed decay might have done inside. Some believe opening it would damage more than it reveals. But some also worry about you. Not supernaturally, but symbolically. Because if the tomb disappoints, if it's smaller than we imagine or less sophisticated, then your myth takes a hit. And your myth has grown too big to fail. You've become a cultural mirror. People see in you what they want, a visionary, a monster, a nation builder, a cautionary tale. You are useful to everyone, and thus, eternally alive. In classrooms, your name is etched into timelines. In politics, your unification is held up as proof of ancient greatness. In media, your search for immortality is retold with a mix of awe and irony. And every time someone walks past the terracotta army, they ask the same question. Who was this man, really? Was he brilliant? Or just lucky? Was he insane? Or simply afraid? Historians still argue whether you were shaped more by trauma or ambition. Whether your childhood as a hostage birthed your obsession with control. Whether your victories were the result of brilliant strategy, or just being the last warlord standing at the right moment. They argue about your mother, your ministers, your mercury pills. But they do not argue about your impact. Because here's the truth, you weren't the best emperor China ever had. But you were the first. The blueprint. The template. The one they all had to react to, either by copying you, or by promising never to be you. And that's more powerful than perfection. You can be erased from the throne. Forgotten in scrolls. Buried under centuries of dirt. But if the system still bears your fingerprints, then you never left. So here we are, the edge of your story, though it never really ends, does it? You're still there, beneath that earthen mound outside Xi'an, wrapped in darkness and silver rivers. The world moves above you, fast and fragile, but you lie still. Waiting. Or maybe watching. It's hard to tell with emperors like you. They say time forgets all tyrants eventually. That the cruelty fades, the monuments collapse, and history smooths even the sharpest reins. But you refuse to be smoothed. You built everything with permanence in mind. Stone. Bronze. Law. Fear. And somehow, against all odds, it worked. Because now, over 2,000 years later, you haven't been forgotten. You're studied in universities. Whispered about in bedtime tales. You've become a shadow puppeteer of identity, nationalism, paranoia, and ambition. Every emperor after you, Han, Sui, Tang, Ming, Qin, had to walk through the house you built, even if they pretended to tear it down. And maybe that's the real trick. You didn't live forever. Your alchemists failed, your elixirs poisoned you, your tomb never breathed life back into your body. But your structure lived. Your idea of empire. Your model of rule. Your obsession with order. Even the chaos that followed you, those rebellions, those betrayals, that civil war, proved your system worked too well to destroy. The next dynasty didn't erase your memory. They absorbed it. Like heat into iron. Historians still argue whether your achievements outweigh your cruelty. Whether standardization came at too high a cost. Whether China would have unified without you anyway, just a little slower, a little softer. But no one argues that you were forgettable. You saw the world at war, took a deep breath, and snapped it into place. You burned books but forged unity. You silenced dissent but gave the peasants roads. You exiled gods but made yourself immortal. You didn't trust people, but you made a civilization that needed people to function, clerks, builders, engineers, farmers, artisans, all humming like cogs in the empire's clockwork. And even now, scholars pore over the records you once ordered to be burned, trying to reconstruct the mind that engineered it all. What kind of ruler creates a death-trap tomb? What kind of man builds a mausoleum larger than his capital? What sort of fear, or confidence, must live in the bones of someone who leaves behind 8,000 warriors, carved and painted, to stand eternal guard? Quirky detail to finish with, some of those clay soldiers wear creased brows. Not of rage. But of worry. As if they, too, are unsure what comes next. And maybe that's the secret. You didn't want to live forever to rule more. You wanted to live forever because, deep down, you knew that everything you built was too fragile without your hand at the center. The empire wasn't just yours, it was you. And once you were gone, it unraveled like silk in rain. But your myth stayed dry. So tonight, as you sleep, picture him, the boy once held hostage behind enemy walls, who became the man they called the first emperor. A child with too many fears, too many enemies, too many dreams. A man who refused to die quietly. A man whose name still glows under the surface of history. And somewhere, deep underground, in a tomb no one dares open, he's still waiting. Not for resurrection, but for recognition. So now, let your breath slow. Let the shadows soften. You've walked through empires tonight. Past clay soldiers and burning scrolls, through palace halls where whispers twisted into laws. You've ridden beside a boy king turned god emperor, seen him bend the bones of a continent into something called unity. And now, the world is quiet again. The tomb lies sealed. The torches are long burned out. The clamor of war, of laws, of ambition, it's all just dust. There's something comforting in knowing that even the greatest figures of history, those who carved nations, buried cities, built walls taller than memory, couldn't escape what waits for all of us, stillness. The final breath. The soft hush of being remembered more than understood. You don't need to carry his weight. Just float above it, like mist over an old battlefield. Let the stories settle like leaves on water. Tomorrow, you'll wake in a different world. One where emperors are names in books and the only thing that truly rules is the turning of time. But for now, in this hush, you're safe. And Qin Shi Huang, ruthless, brilliant, terrified, unforgettable, can keep his empire of shadows, deep beneath the earth. You've got the stars. Good night.